Lawsome by ConsultWebs. Breakthrough insights to build a thriving law firm with your host, Tanner Jones.
Hello, all you awesome listeners. Today on our show, we're going to be talking with Mary Adkins, an author, book writing coach, and a former lawyer. Mary is a seasoned online writing coach dedicated to assisting both budding and established authors. She specializes in helping writers navigate through challenges, enabling them to complete their books by identifying a creative process tailored to their unique needs. Apart from her coaching endeavors, Mary's books have gained international acclaim, being published in 13 countries. Her essays and reports have graced prominent publications like the New York Times, the Atlantic, the Slate, among many others. Today's topic, we're going to be covering strategies to find time for creative self-care amidst a busy legal career. And I know that resonates with a lot of our listeners. So this is such a critical and really interesting topic for any legal professional seeking for a better work-life balance, which is important, obviously, for all of us, especially while tapping into their creative nature. So Mary, thank you so much for joining the Lawsome Show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I guess I could say it's an obvious point that the law profession is known for long hours, hard work. Yet for sustainable productivity and overall happiness, setting boundaries is so important. So how does the lack of self-care impact the overall efficiency and the emotional health of a legal professional, Mary?
You know, it's funny. I remember sometimes that when I had first been admitted to the bar, and I took the bar in New York, so I was in New York City, and I had to go to, I don't even remember. I guess it was the Bar Association that was putting it on, but it was sort of like a training for recently admitted attorneys. And the first session they had for us was how not to become a substance abuser, which at the time
Wow.
we laughed about it. It was kind of like, really, wow, this is such a problem that this is the first thing we're talking about. But over time, I feel like I figured out why that was the case, and it's what we're talking about. I mean, it's because it's not just the long hours, but because I think for so many people, it's such an intense profession. It's grueling, it's emotionally grueling, it's intellectually grueling, and then you add in the grueling hours. It's like a recipe for trying to find some kind of outlets to relax and to release. And when you're at your, the end of your rope, you don't always have the most wise decision making around what those outlets are. Mm-hmm. And so I do think over the past, I haven't practiced law in a long time, but I now teach writing online, and I work with a number of lawyers. And I feel like what I see that really works well for the lawyers I work with is being intentional about the time that they're taking for themselves, as opposed to just trying to get away without taking any time for themselves and then reaching a breaking point, right? Because because we all need it. Like we all kind of know that, I think, at least deep down, even if we don't want to admit it to ourselves because we have so much work to do. So if we don't, I really think at this point in my life, I think if we don't take that time out intentionally, it's going to find a way to pop it. It's going to find a way to rear its head, that need to have time for yourself. Now, in my case, like I teach creative writing. And so that's what I work with people on, is like creative outlets. But not everyone wants that kind of outlet.
Can you give us some examples on what those self-care activities could be?
It could be, in my case, it's writing. And that's who I work with. So people working on novels, people writing poetry, people writing short stories or plays or screenplays. And not to say like, they need to be an aspiring screenwriter, but like to take time out just to explore that creative side, if they have that urge, can be just a really nurturing thing.
I love that. And it's so important. I know that in my own life, that I feel, you definitely feel like there's a weight lifted off when you can take time, and it often takes a true effort to break away from that. But once you find that, you really come away refreshed. And I'm sure we'll be able to come back to some of those points, but you mentioned something earlier, Mary, that I want to spend time on, and that's basically the concept of you have to you have to be proactive with this before it's too late, is what I heard
Yeah.
from it. And that really comes down to setting clear boundaries with ourselves. So any experiences or any suggestions you would have for listeners when it comes to setting good boundaries to ensure we're allocating time for ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, I have had, I worked with a couple of people who have had a lot of success actually putting it on their calendar. So like if it's a shared work calendar or a Google calendar, whatever it is, like physically blocking it off. And when I say it could be 30 minutes a day. It could be an hour a day, but a lot of times people don't want to take the full hour. But even if it's like 30 minutes a day, actually putting it on there so that you get the reminder, so that other people can't book you during that time. Like it looks like you're busy because you are busy. And like guarding it in that very literal way and having a visual representation of it, I think can just be like a very powerful thing for actually executing on the commitment to yourself to do it, And then in terms of what to do at that time, I mean, like I said, I mainly work with people on writing novels. So I will encourage people to just like start brainstorming ideas for whatever it is they want to work on, their novel or their TV show they want to write. I mean, the fun thing about creativity is the sky's the limit. But even in 30 minutes, people are often surprised how much writing they end up getting done and how much fun they have.
I would love to take a little bit of a different direction here, because obviously you used to practice law. You're now actively coaching around writing, but you've lived in that world. You've lived in the demanding, constantly going, fast-paced world of legal, and in that world, naturally, certain things like well-being can get sidelined, and that's why I think it's so important, not just for legal professionals, but any busy professional, to really understand the concept of delegation. We talk about delegation a lot. We've all heard delegation, but I think it's often the most difficult for the most hard-charging people, right? Like the ones who just like to go. It's a really difficult thing. So I'd love to hear from you and what you've learned over the years. One, what are the key or common challenges that lawyers are dealing with when it comes to the process of delegating, but maybe get into a little bit more practical support as they're exploring that?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you. I think delegating is a big challenge for a lot of us, especially when we are kind of high performers who want to make sure things are done kind of quote unquote right, which a lot of times means our way, right? And it feels high stakes because it often is high stakes. So it can just be so hard to let go of a task or a set of tasks or an entire project. But I have found over time that delegating is such a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing, and it's freeing in so many ways. And a major one is that topic of today's podcast. It gives you time to tend to your own needs as a human being and not feel overwhelmed and rushed by having to do everything yourself. So then in terms of like, I'm trying to think of like, what is the most helpful thing I have learned about delegating? And I would say maybe this is obvious, but honestly, the first thing that came to mind is being extremely clear and concrete about expectations. And I don't mean expectations for how it's done, because I actually think that it's good for that to be the how to be in the hands of the person who's doing it, like they can own that, but clear about what the outcome should be and when it's expected. So like being concrete, like, we want this precise thing and we want it at this time. And if you can't get it done by this time, or I will check in with you at this time. And if you can't get it done by this time, let me know. Like having these sort of expectations in place, so at least everybody's on the same page about that. Because, and again, I feel like looking back, it's like 2020 vision in retrospect, right? Like it seems obvious to me now, but for a long time, I didn't do that. It would be like, like just this implication of like, well, let's just, just get it done when you get it done, or, like do it as quickly as you can, or, and that's too vague. It's not, because when we're vague like that, as quickly as you can has a different definition for two different people, right? And so it's inevitable that at some point there's going to be some misunderstanding, and then it's like you're having to adjust, and there's miscommunication, and so it saves everybody that trouble and that potential tension by just being extremely concrete from the beginning. Like, and it also helps with like, when so it's like, okay, can we get this done by Friday? Well, then if the person's like, whoa, that was not my expectation. I was thinking a month, not a week. It's like, okay, well, now we realize we had very different ideas of how long this would take. And so we need to talk about that. Now we are now talking about the process by which it's going to be done so that we can figure out how to shorten that timeline. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is so obvious, but it truly wasn't to me. Like I had to learn this over time.
It's and it's easy too when you're in that fast-paced environment, and it feels like everything, you get one task accomplished and three more land on your desk. It's a challenging mental weight in that process, and that's where I think we often find ourselves. It's easy to make mistakes when you're in that, but that goes back to the whole point of what we're talking about, which is building in capacity to be able to mentally handle appropriate delegation. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because if we can't delegate it, even if we delegate it literally, if we haven't delegated it mentally, it's not helping us, right? Like if our head is still in it, you're waiting for, you're chiming in, you're like, it's not actually off your plate. It's just kind of spread around two people's plates.
I'd like to keep going in this world of delegation, because I do think that this is often where the buck stops in terms of, either you're going to find capacity or you're going to keep living in this fantasy world, and it's just going to continue to slap you in the face every day that you're not making progress, or at least not at the level you want. And so, I'll acknowledge clearly time is finite. There's only so much time, just same for me as it is for you, any given week, any given day in the office. Of course, everyone's wanting time to work for them, not against them. But with that said, do you believe that when it comes to overseeing a team and the process of delegation, do you think weekly or monthly reviews with teammates is critical to maintaining good communication and effectiveness in that? Or do you find that there's value in allowing more time for them to focus on other things for productivity, which naturally leads to a lot more capacity like we're talking about?
So I'm a big fan of weekly reviews and check-ins, and that is quite regular, I realize, and I think it's it comes up very fast. Every week it's like, wow, we're already here again. But I just find that it's a great opportunity just to, I feel like, to touch base, and there's something that always comes out of that exchange. It's like, actually, I am glad we're talking, because here was something I was wondering, and like you realize, oh, this is good we had this exchange because there was a point of clarification we needed to reach, or like we solved a quick problem together. And so it's just like a way of keeping the connection. I don't like it. I've found that even sometimes it's like a 5-minute check. Like it's like sometimes we have nothing to talk about. Great. Okay. Then we're not going to waste time having a meeting that we don't need to be having. But just having a default being that there will be a check-in where it's like anything to talk about. Yes, we talk about it in 4 minutes, or yes, we talk about it in 40 minutes. I just like having that there. That feels good to me, so that it's not, I don't know. I feel like if it's one of those things where it may also depend on the particular relationship and the particular role, because, maybe it's not a situation where the person is taking on tasks and responsibility where that much correspondence is needed, right? So it could be like, okay, well, there's this sort of not much changes in this more long-term project. I'm not sure we even really need to talk as much. So it does feel like it's should be a really customizable thing to the particular relationship.
It makes a lot of sense. You referenced earlier just the value of, one, effective delegation is not just, sharing your desire for something and then walking away from it. There's accountability in it, and that's really what I gather in hearing what you're suggesting. The weekly aspect, it's not you're not agreeing to commit 30 minutes or an hour every single time. Sometimes it may be a few minutes, but it's that consistent accountability that makes progress happen and allows the team member to know that they're being supported, obviously, by you in that process.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so Mary, this whole concept of delegation is an important one. We've stressed it, but there's another angle here I'd like to take, and that's the whole concept of outsourcing marketing. Whether it be outsourcing marketing to a team, it could be even an in-house team that you're building out, or it could be maybe an outside team, a marketing agency. But the whole concept of outsourcing can play in a lot of different streams, whether it's staff, other attorneys, legal work, or as we're talking about here, marketing agencies. So you're running a business now. I mean, clearly that's important to be able to consistently get your brand out there. How does outsourcing tasks to a marketing agency make a law firm more effective or efficient?
So I think it can be an incredibly powerful thing to do and a very dangerous thing to do if you don't hire the right people. And I've been burned by this a couple of times. I hired a couple of different marketing agencies that did not work out for me. And in retrospect, what I see is that I didn't know what questions to ask. So for example, when you are like if it's in-house, you're going to know more because you're going to be aware of who's going to be doing the work. But like if it's out of house, who is actually going to be doing the marketing? I think that's a really big question, a really important question to ask, because like I worked with this one agency where I had these introductory meetings and I really liked the people and we're going to work together and we made this whole plan and I signed a contract, and then the product was not what I expected at all. It was not in my voice. It did not share my values. And I was really thrown. And it turned out that they just like got my contract and then turned around and hired people in the Philippines to do the work. So it was like, oh, I didn't know I had to ask, like, who is going to be doing this work? Like, can I see, like, I want to speak to that person. I want to know that that person and I share values. I want to know that that person and I, or that person at least is familiar with what my company values are and knows who my clients are, who I'm speaking to and what my voice is. Because yeah, I mean, I think you want to be hands-off enough that you're actually delegating, like we were saying a minute ago, and you don't have to keep your head in the project because that defeats the purpose of delegating. But in order to do that, you have to trust that you have to trust, right? You have to trust that they're going to do the work the way that you need it to be done. And so I think, so then I've had another experience where hiring someone where it's been like, oh, this is exactly what I hoped it would be. And it's so freeing because it's like, I truly trust that, you are speaking on my behalf. You are putting together communication on my behalf, and I will obviously weigh in on it, but it's not, I'm not going to feel like I have to redo everything in order for it to be consistent with my brand.
That's fascinating, and I'm so glad you pointed that out, Mary, because that's truly, there is an art to delegation, but there's also an effort to delegation, and that effort, what I refer to there is that I've experienced that myself personally. We just in working with law firms, I've seen one personality to the next. Some that like to crawl in the process and really dig into details and understand, much like what you're alluding to here, and the necessary steps to making the right decision. And guess what? Those firms typically are more successful. Imagine that. They're making better decisions. They're delegating well because they're taking time to do that. We're all capable of doing that, but it takes really a lot of the things that you've stressed here, Mary, in finding the time, finding the capacity to take care of yourself first. I absolutely love that. As we wrap up here and land the plane, I'm curious, is there anything that you would have hoped I would have asked that maybe I didn't cover?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess I would just say from a creative standpoint, since I teach specifically novel writing and people to kind of follow their creative passions, that I know lawyers are super busy. Every lawyer I know is super busy. But having worked with a number of them, if you do have a kind of, you have that creative burn, you have a story that you've thought about writing, or even a book that you want to write, lawyers all the time do find time to do this. And it doesn't have to take over your life. It doesn't have to be hours a day. You can do it in 30 minutes a day, just in the mornings or in the evenings. And it's very possible. So don't feel like you have to wait if you have that creative project burning in you.
That's good sound advice. And one thing I will layer on that is encourage your team. If you're a leader within your law office, encourage your team to find their creative escapes and find their own capacity to take care of themselves. We have at ConsultWebs, the mother company of Lawsome, we have a number of team members, particularly on our content side and our social media side, that are avid writers, Mary. They love to spend time away from legal and writing legal content and producing their own novels and short stories. And I've been fascinated at their, you can see the fulfillment that's experienced in that process. And so, hearing this from you resonates with me because I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen what it does to encourage people and really keep life sustained within them, which is important for any business.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. Thanks, Tanner.
So, Mary, what's the best way for our listeners to contact you?
They could just go to my website. It's maryadkinswriter.com, and Adkins with a D, like David. And all my contact information is there. They can check out my books and my writing program.
Well, thanks again for joining the show. It's been a blast talking with you.
Thanks, Tanner. Me too. Bye.
Lawsome by ConsultWebs with Tanner Jones. For show notes, links, and info, go to consultwebs.com/podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Watch for the next Lawsome episode to discover more breakthrough insights to build a thriving law firm.